Welcome to Jungle Beats, where the Monkaroos review and discuss all types of music. Today's topic, Dawn FM by The Weeknd. Welcome everybody to Jungle Beats,
Holla at me.
our first podcast. Let's go around. Everyone introduce yourselves. I'm MC Sebzi. Catch me streaming on Twitch. Catch me making that music, you know. Who's next?
I can go.
Yeah.
My tag is Penderglass, but I'm Kevin. Big music lover, love all kinds of music. Traditionally, I haven't been, always hard on into The Weeknd, but I've gone into him over the years. I'm just excited to talk about his new work, kind of see where this discussion goes, comparing new and old, and
For sure.
yeah, I'm excited.
Dope.
Yeah. I'm what an intro. Kuro, aka Googs, aka Googly Earmos, the one and only. Catch me on Twitch at Googs9. Most of my stuff, Googs9. Yeah, so Weeknd album review thing today, Dawn FM.
Yeah,
which is
Dawn
fun.
FM.
Are we going straight into history and
Yeah, you could start us off. So, how long have you been listening to The Weeknd there, Kiro?
since I've been alive, I've been listening since Kissland came out. That's when I first listened to The Weeknd, and I've been a long time ago, like 2014, 13, something like that.
Very nice.
I can't remember the date, but I was like, yeah, I found him when I remember I'd bring up like, oh, you know who The Weeknd is? People are like, who the hell's that? Like they've never heard of him. It was a while ago. I've been a big avid fan of his through the years. Got to see him live a couple times, which is awesome. Got to meet the guy.
Oh, yeah.
He's very short.
Damn.
But yeah, so definitely am very familiar with his discography.
Very nice, very nice. Kevin, yourself?
Yeah, I briefly talked about it in my introduction, but I've gotten more adjusted to The Weeknd stuff in the last couple of years. Obviously, I started listening to his older works, primarily Trilogy, and obviously his big break albums, the Star Boys and whatnot. I still really enjoyed, and I could see it was a shift in his sound and all that, but yeah, I've generally have enjoyed his styles over the years, and I think he's, as far as big pop stars go these days, he's definitely one of my favorites in terms of quality. So
For sure.
yeah.
Very nice. I, on the other hand, not the biggest Weeknd listener, not because of dislikes or anything, but personally just never really got into him too deeply, kind of like only ever heard him on the radio, so I was always kind of like, oh, just like, whatever. But Googs actually got me into the Weeknd. Yep, he started showing me some songs and stuff. Oh man, I heard The Birds Part 1 and I was like, damn, I want to hear more of this guy. Like, this is some like fire. So I've only recently been getting into a lot more of his stuff. Like, I've heard songs here and there, I like a song, whatnot, but never really like checked into him. But starting with this Dawn FM, like started looking into it, started listening to his whole discography, just like bouncing through a bunch of songs and just really getting into him. And damn, I'm finding a lot of gems, I could say for sure. But definitely even with this album, man, I'm enjoying The Weeknd. That's all I gotta say. So yeah, so let's just get right into it. All right, first takes. I'm not, who wants to go first?
Yeah, this is obviously whoever goes first kind of sets the tone.
Honestly, yeah.
My opinion, I'm most curious about Kiro having
I'm very curious if you want to.
experience. I already heard a bit about your initial reactions when you first heard it, but now you've revisited the album, you've been able to
really listen to it.
really formulate your opinion having more time with it. So I'm really curious about how you feel about it at this point.
Yeah. I'll start with the big Weeknd fan.
Alrighty. I feel like like you said, right? I fell into this trap every time one of his late releases come out, where I'm like, this is not what I wanted, right? I always end up at, this is not what I want from Abel, right? Meaning, obviously I'm so attached to the sound of Trilogy, Kissland, even Beauty Behind the Madness, I think was excellent. And that's another reason why I loved My Dear Melancholy, the little EP he came out with. but that doesn't mean it's not good music, right? It's not what I wanted, but is it good music? And then because of that mentality, the albums always come in bad taste at first because I'm like, not the sound I wanted to hear. But as you listen to it, you're like, you know what? It's still good. This is still, when it comes to art, it's good art, right? Now, of course, Dawn FM is going to be compared a lot to like After Hours, very similar sound. You got the 80s synthetic, kind of rocky. This is a bit, I think this is a bit more, he goes a bit more like classical R&B somewhere, a little more dreamy R&B, like dreamy, a lot of synths, obviously. I feel decent. I feel good about it. I think this album definitely, big dog over there, excuse that in the background, big boy doggy. I definitely feel like it definitely grew on me. Definitely grew on me. The album definitely grew on me. As I listened, I'm like, okay, this is good. This is good. This is like, it's stuff is growing on me. Comparing it to After Hours directly, I would say that After Hours had higher highs and lower lows compared to Dawn. I think Dawn FM is a safer album. I don't think he goes too out of his comfort zone. He knows what's sounding good, what he's doing well, and he sticks to it, right? And that's why it's a constant, like, at that level, I think. And it also hurts the album, in my opinion, and that aspect, that it doesn't explore in one way or another. Like, even After Hours did that slightly more, but because it's safe in an overall sense, it might be better than After Hours, I would say. Overall, because it can stay at that level consistently. But if I can come up with a couple songs at After Hours, definitely better, right, to Dawn. But that's kind of my first little intakes, my first impressions. So I'm interested to hear you guys.
Yeah, hell yeah. I feel like I might take the spot and let Kevin be that final
No worries. I have no problem.
our group's devil's
That way I
advocate.
it's
So you
perfectly
can
for me.
roast the weekend. Honestly, so my first listen into it, I was coming from Kiro's first take on it, what he was telling me. And I was like, okay, so I kind of had a bit of a bias on that sense, and I was really looking at it really critically because I'm like, I really want to like just tear this apart, see what really is objectively, right? So I looked at it hard, and again, not being a biggest Weeknd listener, I listened to a lot of his older stuff and really compared the track back and forth between those things. And I noticed some things, and so I started, taking my first notes at it, kind of being like, all right, like I noticed this, and like, maybe nipping at that here and there, but I've just been listening to it and listening to it and listening to it, and my goodness, am I ever just in love with this goddamn album. I don't know what it is. I listen to this, bro. I listen to it in the car, and like I can't help but sing along. And at first I felt like the catchiness was a bit like, like I always look at catchy songs and I'm like, honestly, catchiness, it doesn't make a good song. It's not that hard to make a catchy song. But like, like just the vibe of this song is just so nice, and I'm able to just like jam with it, even looking at it from like that objective standpoint. And I was saying earlier, because I had some notes on it, but I went back to check those notes, and that was like after like my first listen and comparing it to previous albums. And honestly, like all of the notes were just so like kind of negatively, but looking at it through now, I was listening to see what I really wanted to pull from them, and honestly, I just felt like the entire thing was useless because I'm like, that's not how I feel about the album anymore whatsoever. Oh, it's good. I really like it. I'm really enjoying it. I'll definitely go into detail and further and stuff, and pick out at what I dislike about it as we go through the tracks or whatnot. But yeah, I'm definitely on Team Weekend right now.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I guess I'll touch on my initial and overall feelings about the album. Generally speaking, I really enjoyed the album. I think kind of coming back to, Kiro's attitude on the album where he's like, he identifies with Abel's early sounds, and while he still can see the quality of the album, it's not what he wants. In a similar way, I really enjoyed that like 80s synth sound. And prior to this, in the past, I've actually listened to like Outrun music, which is like that really heavy, synth wave synths going hard, and it's purely instrumental, right? And that's without any vocals. So like really having that blending sound with like that R&B vibe, I think is really good. At the same time though, I feel like it hasn't fully met its highest potential throughout the the two albums, because it is ultimately a piece of pop
Mhm.
designed for like a general audience,
For
which is
sure.
fine because you still have a lot of great moments on the album. But
Mhm.
um, uh, I do see where Kirill, he mentions, he's playing it safe a bit, which I agree. But it's still like even those playing it safe songs, they capture a vibe that I still enjoy and identify with. It's just like it would be more fun if he did this or played around
Mhm.
with some
Mhm.
other ideas, right? So there's still like yeah, even like going through like I don't know. I just really like the instrumentals of it
Mhm.
all and the production, and that's really where I identify with. And obviously, I think it really complements Abel's voice.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So that's really where I think this album succeeds big
Yeah,
time.
for
And
sure.
yeah, obviously, we'll get more into that as we
As we get
discuss
in.
more in depth of all the
But yeah.
songs and what I like and don't like for each.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. That like that was one of my first few takes that I always like looked at through the album too, where it was like I feel like he isn't as like having as much fun with it, right? Like he like I've heard some older songs and I was like, damn, bro, he like goes like even just like takes one word and hits like four different arpeggios within like
Mhm.
the same tone. And it's like, holy shit. But like now it's kind of just like, oh, like this is the range for like the first verse, and then he just hits the same range the second verse, and there's not really much differences in there, right? Of course, a few songs aside, but yeah, I kind of wish there was a little more like of that explosiveness. Like again, I
Mhm.
mean, I'll always think of the Birds. That's like definitely one of my favorite Weekend songs, and like just like the way like his vocals come through, and I feel like there was less of that because he's trying to make these like radio play songs, I guess, if that makes
Mhm.
sense, right? So it is
Yeah.
a lot more like catchy and basic and like easier to grasp on a level, I guess.
Mhm.
I think a
But yeah.
really good example of that,
Mm,
what you were saying about like the creativity and letting him kind
mhm,
of do his thing, is "Take My Breath" in this album.
mm, mm,
Mainly
Yep.
because that was actually a single
100%.
at first, right?
yeah.
Yep.
And I was okay. I thought the single was
Mhm.
fine. The song that's on the album is not the single; it's the
No,
extended
eh?
version.
Which
And
I
The
love.
Weeknd, I think I've always felt this way, is at his best when you just give him time to play with his vocals, like
Yeah.
those 5 minute, 6 minute songs where he just like he's not even saying anything at this point. He's just vibing with the music and letting his vocals spiral out of control, kind of thing, right? And just
Mhm,
going. That's when I think The Weeknd's at his best. And I thought it was like a
mhm,
really big example of that. Is like what he does in Trilogy a lot. You have songs that are like 8, 9 minutes, not just one or two. Like there is
Mhm.
multiple songs that are at that length in Trilogy because that allows him to just explore his
mhm,
vocals through a single song. And that's why I was so happy to see that they put the extended version rather than the single in the
mhm. Oh
album.
man,
Totally.
I love
Yeah.
that version. I literally heard the normal version in the car today
Mhm.
on the radio, and I was like
Mm.
jamming. I'm like, oh wow, they just started right at the verse,
Mhm.
and then even that second like long part isn't
Oh,
there, right? So it's
yeah.
like so weird. It's like
Yeah.
oh, but like it
I
just adds so
actually
much like
haven't
crescendo.
listened to just the single version of
Don't.
that song at
I
all.
haven't either. I haven't either. I
Yeah.
assume it's the radio play version, which I
It
heard.
is,
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, like I
and that came
assumed
out
it cut.
first. So they
Yeah.
originally they came out with that one first, and then
Mhm.
he came out with the extended, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this
Oh
is
man.
this is what I want
Yeah,
to hear.
even the
Yeah.
way it like connects with the
Mhm.
oh, I'm a big sucker for like crossing between the songs. Like once you're finished a
Transitions.
song, it like
Yeah.
yeah, transitioning.
I
I
was,
love that.
I was gonna
Yeah,
try to go
it's
into that next, and I was gonna say that
Going.
if
Yeah.
you
Well,
go ahead.
yeah. No,
well,
you go
I
ahead.
just wanted to quickly before we get, I
Mhm.
just wanted just similar to that point. In terms of like creativity, like one of my favorite songs off of Trilogy was House of Balloons, Glass Table Girl. So
Mm-hmm.
any song with like a proper clean beat change, even though like in a
Mhm.
sense it's two different songs really,
Mhm. Mhm.
but it when you compound it into one experience under
Mhm.
one track, um, I think he can really pull off something sweet with that, and I
Mhm.
think he did that great with that track. And obviously, like just because I'm such a big fan, I would love to see something like that done again in the future.
Mhm.
And I don't know if he has really.
Yeah.
Kira, you might know a bit better,
Yeah.
like of his history since then, if he's done any more like big beat switch songs
Mm-hmm.
in that retrospect. But yeah, I think obviously it's a great creative moment.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, I was gonna agree with that. And even further on that, like I like that the whole album just meshed really nicely. Like I do love like beat switches and stuff like that, but like I like how there was a lot of connectivity between the album as well. Like a lot of things like one of my favorite things is when like kind of like the next song isn't like transitioned into it, but it's like teased with interludes. And that's we'll kind of get into the interludes in a sec, but like yeah, man, like one of the interludes just kind of like gets into it. And unless anyone else has to add, like I'm happy to go straight into the interludes and talk about them.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, just
yep.
quickly, just for one standout moment
Yeah, for sure.
of that kind of blending, which I
Hmm.
love the intro and outro of these blending songs of "How Do I Make You Love Me" and "Take My
Mm.
Breath Away." The
Yep.
synth had a nice kind of Eye of the Tiger vibe. I don't know if you picked
Yeah,
up on
I
Yeah.
know
that.
what you're saying.
And
Yeah,
like that was just like
build up.
damn, like this is such a nice little like transition, which you often don't really like because it really isn't a clear identity with either of the songs. It's kind of like
Mhm.
Mhm.
a core part of like the
Mhm.
beginning and end of each. So
Yeah,
I thought that was really
100%.
really nice
Mhm.
ad
Yeah.
for sure.
Kiro, anything to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say if you would like if I had to pick one thing about this album that's like really popped out to me, it's just the production throughout the whole thing is
Mm.
magnificent. Like it is,
Mhm.
no one can deny how good
Mhm.
the production is, and the transitions are a big part of that. And there's multiple transitions that it just blew my mind.
Mhm.
They were so seamless. Like
Oh, for
and like
sure.
yeah, you were saying kind of like you had that moment of like hype, like they were building it up into the next song. You're
Mhm.
like, oh my god, like
Yeah,
Mhm.
you're just taking me
Yeah.
there. It was just
Yeah,
really good. Yeah.
right. No, for sure. I love that. And like even the whole like concept of the album too, like the radio station stuff, it worked so beautifully and like,
Mhm.
the concept of like death and stuff, right? Or like in time of dying. It's like really nice and it just like it's cool to have that like 80s synth on top of that concept because
yeah,
it's like it fits the vibe of like it's weird, right? It's like whoa, right? Um
completely.
yeah. But yeah, definitely just jumping straight into the interludes here. Um like I freaking Phantom Regret, so good. Like that whole Jim Carrey section just so good. Just the way it's like spoken and everything.
It
It's
was
so like
poetic, man. It
nicely
was,
put together.
yeah.
100%, bro. And it ties the whole album like nicely together and there's like a lot of good points they're hitting and stuff.
Hmm.
Um I
It
love the
really it sets the
freaking
theme really well. Like it
yeah,
kind of
it
not sets
Yeah,
the theme. It restates the
reinforces.
theme, reinforces the theme.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's at the end of the album, so it really like
Mhm.
basically solidifies what it was doing, what it was
Yeah.
about, and we can we
Yeah.
can dive into the theme a bit more and what's going on
Yeah, we'll get into
later.
that
But
definitely.
yeah, definitely, it was really really good. Like Jim Carrey goated, of course, just
Yeah.
like killed it. He was just amazing.
So good. Oh man. But yeah, and then I love the little freaking the infomercial like freaking that
Mm.
like do like afterlife, afterlife,
yeah,
afterlife. Like that's just
really,
such a sick segment.
yeah, really threw you back and like really put you in the spot of that
Right?
'80s radio station,
Mhm.
Mm,
um, which
yeah.
was really dope.
Yeah, I really just it's like it's just like I always like listen to this kind of music like that 80s discotheque music and it's just like I
Mhm.
always remember Night at the Roxbury, like well one of my favorite movies. And it's just like that like vibe, right? It's just like yeah, it's so good. Um but yeah, and then Tale by Quincy was also just like a nice little like nod to Quincy Jones and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. It was just like a nice little simple one. Even the intro I
Mhm.
really liked.
Wait, was
Just
that
like
Quincy Jones talking?
I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it was, but I'm not
I'm not sure
too
either.
sure. I don't know if it
Hmm.
was like a vocal from him or what
Yeah,
it was, but it's a tribute to Quincy Jones, yeah. Because I think he apparently won the Quincy Jones Humanitarian Award.
that's really cool.
The
I didn't
weekend
know
did.
that. Yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah.
I really like Quincy Jones,
So
so
yeah,
that's
yeah,
cool.
I love Quincy Jones as well,
Hmm.
bro. Ooh, Austin Powers, bro. Ooh.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then the intro was so nice too, bro. Those vocals. Oh, I love that like layering of vocals.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh yeah,
I
and then it
love, yeah, the intro was
cruises into
so good, man.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
It,
it's
really
just
good.
that
real
was very
nice.
much like the synths like taking you away and like
Mhm.
Yeah,
preparing you for this journey you're about to go on, right?
Yeah,
That's really what it felt like.
100%. Really well
Yeah.
done. Oh man. But yeah, speaking of the tale of by Quincy Jones, yeah, just the entire backtrack, it just
beautiful.
nice and you hear that beat and you're like, yeah, and it just feels nice, and then it
Yeah.
cruises into my favorite song on the album,
Oh,
Out of Time. Out of Time.
Wow.
oh, I like
I
it.
don't know what it is. The lyrics really resonate with me. Um, but just the sound of it, man, like, and especially when it comes out of that interlude, it just right into the song, and it's just
Mhm.
that beats there. It's like, oh, and it just, oh man, he hits it. Oh, it hits, it hits. That's what I'm looking for in the weekend songs that just like, yes, like,
Mhm.
ooh, you know. Um, yeah, I really like that song. It's so good. I just listen to it constantly, like jam out in the car, man. Like, oh, something about it is just so nice. Those like the notes he hits and everything. And this is one of the songs where I felt he does like kind of break into that, where it's like not just like the same kind of chorus again and again. Like once he gets like afterwards, like there's like gaps and you just have those
Mhm.
backtrack vocals. And like I love those things, bro. Just like the out of time. Just
Mhm.
like, oh, I love that stuff in songs. But like when it comes into that and then like he really stretches out that last I think it's like say that I'll care for you but I'm out of time, but like he really just like brings it up and like changes the way he like sings it in that last hook. And oh man, it hits all the right notes for me. It's definitely like there's definitely other, I mean, Take My Breath, super good as well. I'd say that's like up there as well, classic. And I do love that like 5-6 minute chunk of it, right, where it's like that,
Mhm.
like it's a whole thing, right? It's not just like here's your song done, right? But yeah, there's definitely other great songs. What do you guys feel
You can
about?
go.
Yeah, no,
Sorry,
I
Akira.
definitely agree with Out of Time. Out of Time is definitely like top three kind of
Yeah.
song. It was amazing. It was really good. I almost felt like that could have been on like Silk Sonic almost.
Oh,
Kind of
100%.
had that
Yeah,
vibe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
got that
and
vibe.
that's the only thing I had against it is that I loved the song. I was like, this is great, but Silk Sonic could have done it better.
Yeah, literally,
I
it's
like kept
true.
having
It's
that on
true.
my mind, and I'm like, damn it, that's. I hate that I'm
Uh,
even thinking about that because it's still like a fantastic song again, like one of my favorite
yeah,
songs of the album. But that's
I
all I
agree
could
though.
think about was that literally just if you put that on Silk Sonic, replace that. Like
Yeah,
imagine, or if even better, like if you had a feature there and you had like Anderson .Paak on
yeah,
there.
bro.
Oh my
Oh
god,
yeah.
that would have been sounding great. And I'd love to go into the choice of features later, but it was
Mhm.
it was
100%. We'll talk about
Yeah.
Out of Time is yeah is something
that.
It
special. It's
was
a
it
great
was a
song.
great track at the time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
100%.
If I may
Hmm.
add quickly too,
Go for it.
I just wanted to touch upon because it was funny because I was listening to it and I'm just like, I feel like this is the weekend's like, why man, they didn't add me in in the Silk Sonic album. Like, here's my take. Like, yeah, like just trying to be like, here guys, I'm here too. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
that's definitely how I felt too.
Definitely.
Kevin, how'd you feel about Out of Time?
At the time, no, it was just really solid track. You know, it's I enjoyed it. It was definitely a standout track for sure.
Mm,
I wouldn't rate it necessarily among my top ones right
for
Mhm.
now.
sure.
Um, and that's probably just because I like the electronic
For sure.
heavy
Yeah, it had less
kind of
electronic aspect to it.
yeah
Mhm.
tracks, right? Um, and when I
Mhm.
go into like I remember I mentioned to you
Mhm.
secretively before this podcast
Mm.
about my initial favorite song was Best
Mm.
Friends.
Mm.
Um, and I still think it's definitely one of my favorite songs off
Mhm.
this record. Just
I
it's
love to
just
hear
the
that.
build
Yeah.
up and yeah, the
Mhm.
vibe is just killer,
Yeah,
right?
the beat's really good on that one.
Yeah, it was so good.
That's
But
definitely one you, sorry, go.
no, I'm just saying like I'm just struggling not to put Take My Breath as my
Yeah.
favorite song. It's just
Mhm.
it's too good. It's too
Mhm.
So good.
it's a bit there's more nuance to it,
Mhm.
which I think it's kind of like almost a tease of what potential is in store for like what can be accomplished with this sound,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
100%.
Because like I kind of feel as though with a lot of these songs, you kind of get an idea of what the entire song is going to be about within the
Mhm.
first like 20,
Mhm.
30 seconds. Because it's
Yep.
kind of
Sound of it.
yeah, it doesn't take you anywhere outside of like
Mhm.
a general vibe, which
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
cool. Yeah, it's a cool vibe that you can catch, right?
Mhm.
But like,
Mhm.
and like, there's a lot of great moments. Like I really liked, is there someone else? I really
Mhm.
liked,
Oh, yeah.
um, but probably in turn just because I like the really heavy dance. Like I feel like
Yeah.
"How Do I Make You Love Me" was like a
Mhm.
very dance influenced track of like
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
electronic um
Great
genre.
hook. really good
Yeah.
hook in that song.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, very
That ring.
dancey. Great track.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, best friends. Oh, I love the Tyler track. That was
Very
fantastic. I like
good.
I
that. It's
love
just
the
like this
Tyler
laid
track.
back vibe.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
they both performances killed it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
and I'll let Kiro kind of talk about his favorite tracks before we go on to like
Mhm.
some tracks that maybe it wasn't our
Yeah.
favorites or whatnot.
Wasn't our
So
favorites.
I'll pass it over to Kiro
I,
here.
actually, I actually want to take it back to Best Friends for a sec first.
Mm.
I loved that track. I thought it was great. I don't think it belonged on the album. I think it
Mm.
sounded like it didn't belong on that album. Like with the
Yeah.
rest of the sound, it was like I was like, "Whoa, where did this come from?" Like when it came on, in a good way, because I was loving it. I'm like, "This is
Yeah, it
sick.
hits.
This
It
sounds
hits.
so good." And it's like a little dark. There's a darker tone behind it, and it's amazing. But I'm like, "This is not part of this album. This shouldn't be on Dawn FM." Like that's my
Mhm.
honest opinion on that song. That's like I loved it. It's so good, but shouldn't be here, kind of thing.
Yeah, very out of left field.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the songs, yeah, we talked about Take My Breath, and I talked about why I love that, like giving him the space to explore this
Mhm.
with his vocals and stuff. I really like Sacrifice. I know that was the single,
Mm.
but I thought
Mm.
that was so good. Like it kind of like Thriller, kind of sounded like Thriller in the beginning,
He
and
did
then
have some MJ,
yeah, kind of like
but
Maroon 5-ish too in the beginning. Like I said, like when
yeah.
just a
Mhm.
beat, it sounded like it was about to be like Adam Levine was on a hop on that track or something. But it's a good track, like overall through. And then I mentioned this to Seb before that one of my favorite songs, and it stayed my favorite song. I would say is Less Than Zero.
Mm.
I especially after re-listening to it a couple more times, I'm like, this is just so good. Like this is just perfect. I have nothing wrong with this song. It just
Oh,
kept getting
man.
better and
Yeah.
better as I listened to it.
Yeah.
I was absolutely loving that. That's definitely one of my favorites of the album. I'd love to transition into some of the issues we have as we
Yeah.
just get past
First, I just want to
half them.
quickly touch upon just
Go
because
ahead.
when you said best friends didn't belong in the album,
Mhm.
I immediately thought that like in the exact opposite, Less Than Zero was like the very like clear, defined
Not
Sound.
belong on
like
it.
best
Yeah.
song that like really was the sound
Mhm.
of the album,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I really think it succeeded with the most in retrospect.
Mhm.
Which yeah, you could argue a lot of different things, but
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Less Than Zero though.
For
But
sure. No, honestly, yeah, honestly,
Mhm.
so best friends, because yeah, so Kevin mentioned it, and I was like, again, it was one of those songs that like didn't stick out to me when I was like thinking back to it.
Mhm.
Man, when I was listening to it over and over again, every time it came on, I'm like, oh, I know
Oh,
which song this is. Like I
yeah.
knew right off the bat, and I'm like, dude, this song hits. It's
Mhm.
so good. Really, it was about to be up there for me. Like I'm like, damn, that's like definitely up there. Less Than Zero. Also, I still really like that song. It's true, yeah. Less Than Zero fits it really nicely, and Best Friends is really like out of the blue,
Mhm.
but it still fits a bit, and I like it that it's right after Here We Go Again because of like the lighter tone of it. And I really liked both Here We Go Again and Starry Eyes because I feel like that was the most like weekend sounding ones that I found. Like
Really.
they were, because like from a lot of the older stuff that I would hear, like it's a lot laid back tracks and stuff, right? And it's concentrated purely on like his vocals, just like really out there and stuff, and it's like really raw on his vocals, and that's why I liked, because like he just kind of got to like have like a nice light backtrack with like a light percussion, and then he just had the space like how Kiro was mentioning. So I like that, like in Here We Go Again, like he hit those highs and stuff, and he like really sang it out. And then in
Mhm.
Starry Eyes too, I liked like the vibe of it because it is just like really concentrated on his vocals leading this songs a lot more, as opposed to like a lot of the rest of those, which like have these nice built up tracks, which are phenomenal. So it's like you kind of get the both. But in those ones, I feel like it really is purely concentrated on his voice, just driving it.
I think
But
I disagree with you on Starry Eyes. I loved. I completely resonate with what you said for Here We Go Again,
yeah,
and
Mhm.
100% that's what I'm feeling for Starry
Okay.
Eyes. I feel like it kind of like left me wanting more every time I heard it.
Oh
It was
yeah,
like it was a build up, and then where's the climax? Like where's
yeah,
where's where's the catchy part? Like you know what I mean? You kept waiting for it, and it just didn't reach that.
Right. I 100% felt that when I first was making my notes. I was like, listening to his older stuff, like he goes and like he just
Mm.
keeps reaching tops that is like, oh shit,
Mhm.
and then he just tops himself and he goes again.
Mhm.
But in Starry Eyes, I felt that a lot
It
where I'm like,
was it's kind of
it's
yeah.
highs, but it was pretty like lackluster. Like he could have done so much more. Like there was
Mhm.
so much potential on that song. And like I really liked how it was like starting and going, but yeah, you're right. I felt like that's a good point of view where it's like it didn't really go anywhere.
It was building up, and the build up was great, but then
Mhm.
I didn't get rewarded for staying there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's kind of how I felt listening to it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. But yeah, I felt like a lot of the songs, it was actually tough for me to find like songs that I didn't like. Like at first I was like, oh man, Gasoline's like not that good. But then I kept hearing Gasoline and I was like, oh my god, bro, Gasoline's
Well,
good. Like when he hits that
Really,
hook,
gasoline is at the bottom of my list, 100%.
really?
100%.
Damn.
Yeah.
All right.
Whoa.
I
Go into
don't
that.
know what he was doing with that accent, the voice
Oh,
change.
low.
I did not like the accent. I hated. I was like, what are you doing? I did not
Whoa.
like it.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, man.
The sound edit of him was just not
Mm,
great. It was
okay.
yeah.
Okay, we're going into
Gasoline.
gasoline. I guess we gotta just talk gasoline, you know. See, I will admit it's not like one of like the top tracks,
Hmm.
but I really liked the drums. I
Mhm.
thought the synths were really interesting in how like the great thing about like 80s synths is that they almost act in a sense kind of like drums and how like they're
Hmm.
they're kind of like an arpeggiator, and they kind of have that vibe to it, right? So that's purely the production. Um, I loved how the whole build up he had this vocoder, that like deep vocoder,
Mm.
and I enjoyed that, and I really thought it was refreshing how he switched it for the chorus. He hit him with like his actual voice.
Mhm. The
I
highs.
thought that was nice. And it's not like it's kind of similar to like the entire album. It's kind of dancing between like a very chill
Mhm.
vibe and like a hard hitting vibe. It's not really in either camp necessarily,
Hmm.
right? And I also really like the outro with that like distortion
Mm.
synth.
Yeah, that was pretty
I thought
cool.
that was pretty
Yeah.
sick.
I have
Yeah, I
nothing
like
against the
a lot of
production.
playing around.
Yeah. The
Mhm.
production was
Right.
great. And it's very
Yeah.
hard to say any negative thing about any production on these songs. Like
Yeah.
That's fair.
it's very hard because it is just consistently great.
Mhm.
But I mean, the Weeknd's not shy. Like he's not done that. He's not stopped himself from changing his voice like through like the computer
Mhm.
like before. Like a big example in Trilogy is like at the Initiation or Glassdoor. He does that, and Glass Table. Sorry, there is some of that. And honestly, the initiation, I loved it. Like kept going up and down with his voice, like very like low and very high, and it was like computer generated.
Mm.
But I think the accent plus that is what just threw me off. And
Yeah.
it just sounded so distorted in my ears. I was like, I hate this. This is
It just
awful.
sounded funky.
And that's what made me have a negative review of the album at first as well, because it's literally the first full song you
Yeah,
listen to
full song, yeah.
after the
True.
intro. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
Fair.
I'm hating this. Yeah, so it just left like a really bad taste afterwards.
I get you.
Fair.
On top of that, may I add, so the lows were the ones things on the album where I disliked, but also liked because again, he's usually at that high pitch, so it's interesting to hear him low.
Mhm.
So I quickly wanted to ask your take, Kiro, on Don't Break My Heart, because he also
Mhm.
goes pretty low on that and
Mhm.
uses a lot of like similar types of like tones and stuff.
Mhm. I think you just said it best. Similar tones. Already. Don't break my heart. Right. I think I already heard it. Like that's what I felt like. When I heard it, I was like, this is like
Yeah.
2 songs ago. I heard this already. You know what I mean? Like 3 songs ago, I heard this
Yeah,
already.
just-
I thought that was one of the most bland songs on the album.
I agree.
It was just very boring. And again, this is what I mean by this album was safe. There was no obvious lows. There was no, oh, God, this track is horrendous. I don't think there's any like that. But a lot of them where he chose to just be safe and it was the same sound. And Don't Break My Heart, I think, is
one of
that
those.
song. It's
Yeah.
very much so. Where I'm like, I heard this. I already heard this. This is not doing anything for me. It's not initiating anything new for me. That's definitely how I felt about that
Sure.
song.
For me, definitely it was between that, like I think that's where I was like at. I'm like, Don't Break My Heart, definitely worst song of the album. Even checking my notes and stuff, like, and these notes I made like 3 days ago, it was also like, yep, Don't Break My Heart's definitely the worst song of the album. So I'm like, okay, yeah. But honestly, like it was between that and then for some reason I was going back to Sacrifice, and I'm like, I don't know, like something about Sacrifice just kind of kept me like it
Really.
was just kind of low and stuff. But like
Mm.
then I heard like back and forth the both of them, and I was like, no, Sacrifice is definitely the winner. Granted, my favorite lyric from is definitely in Don't Break My Heart. It's what he says, I almost died in the disco tech 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 tech. So good, bro, when he hits that, bro.
Oh
It's
man.
like beautiful. But definitely, yeah, like I wouldn't say it's a bad song
Mhm.
altogether.
All right.
But I would definitely like agree that it was, sorry Kevin.
No,
That it was
you have
that it
your
was like, yeah, like it was just kind of like bland and it wasn't really going anywhere. And yeah, I don't know, the lows, like I like the lows on the hook, but like not too much on like the verse parts. And then but
Mhm.
I love the bridge on that song though when he goes like super low. I really like
Mhm.
that part. I wish it was a bit longer though. It was a little like short, and I was like, oh, that's it. Kevin, what are your takes on "Don't Break My Heart" and
Don't
"Gas"?
break my heart. I kind of agree with your point. Like it is kind of bland in a sense.
Hmm,
At the same time, I enjoyed it.
mhm,
It still fits as like background music, right? It's a nice vibe. I enjoyed it. I personally, my two least favorite songs on the album
mhm,
were "Starry Eyes"
mhm.
and "I Heard You're Married."
Oh god,
Um,
awful. I heard you
Okay.
married it. Yeah. I heard you
yeah,
married
I
was
don't know.
rough. It was
You
rough.
know, yeah, I
And,
just with
yeah.
the vibe of the album, Lil Wayne just did not
Fit.
like fit at
Yeah.
all.
I
Not
felt
at
that.
Especially,
all.
I don't know, like I don't know what was going on with this song. It was just wasn't
I
working for
I
me.
actually didn't mind the weekend's part.
Yeah, that's the
You know,
thing.
Nah, I
You
like
could
the
see
weekend
him
part.
putting an
it wasn't
effort, like in his
standout.
verses, and that, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
I just it just left me
Lil
kind of
Wayne was the wrong
confused.
choice. Lil Wayne was the
mhm,
wrong choice, and
Yeah,
it should have been, in my opinion, a female vocalist. I think would have really
mm.
fit well in
That
that
would have been
song.
good.
Like
yeah,
Yeah,
if you
almost like
put
a
like
duet.
SZA or Doja or some, like if you want
Mm,
to make it more,
yeah.
modern, I
yeah.
think they would have killed it. But even I think Lil Wayne would have killed it if he stick to more of his like melodic sounds that he's done before,
Mm,
which
mm.
he didn't. And I was really surprised. It was like,
Mm.
no, he's just gonna rap. And I'm like, this no,
Yeah, it's just like
this
a
doesn't fit.
monotone, like
Yeah.
quick, and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
And I felt that with the just to jump quickly from the track, but we'll get back to it. But I felt that also with Tyler the Creator's verse, where it was just kind of like very similar. Like I felt both verses were the same verse, and I felt like I didn't like I Heard You're Married as much as a lot of the other songs because I felt
Mhm.
like it was, funnily enough, Here We Go Again,
Again.
right, where it's just like it was like this nice, like, oh yeah, I like the weekend part, like he's singing, he's good,
Mhm.
and then it just gets into the feature, and then it's just like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, it's just gonna be a quick little like
I think
rap skit of a monotone voice.
I think for Here We Go Again, I think lyrically that was a really good song too. I think that
Yeah,
was,
oh,
in my
lyrically I think it
opinion,
was better.
one of the best lyrical songs, like talking about
Mhm.
just, you just finished talking about the sacrifices you make in relationships and how,
Mm-hmm.
that's why you're getting out of them, that's why you run out of time with them, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
not willing to make the sacrifices, but then you find someone new that you're making an attachment with, so then, here we go again, right? We're back into this loop of me getting
Yeah.
attached and then getting back in that mindset of like, oh, but I don't want to make sacrifices, I don't want to make my own sacrifices. And it was just a really good lyrical
Mhm.
song. Here we
Yeah,
go
it
again.
went
Yeah.
well. It flowed well in the album too. The way like yeah, all those like all these songs came like just how you're saying like into Here We Go Again, and then into
Hmm.
like Best Friends, and so is there someone else? And then even on that topic, like I felt like I Heard You're Married was just is there someone else again? And I
Hmm.
was just like I felt like it was similar to how you're saying Don't Break My Heart. Like you've heard it already. Like I
Hmm.
felt like I Heard You're Married was like that. It was like all right, I've just heard this right. Like even feature wise, like it's like at a similar area where the feature comes in and stuff like that, right? In the song.
Yeah. Definitely.
Kevin, anything to add?
Oh, I agree. Like I really like, Here We Go Again. I thought Tyler had a fantastic verse. I thought it really
I like
fit the
both.
vibe. Um, yeah, yeah, nothing too much to add on top of
Mhm.
that.
I'd love to hear
Things.
what your opinions are, because everyone's going to compare this to After Hours, right? That's just inevitable,
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
because of the sound. But what do you think of it compared to After Hours? Because I know you're both exposed to that album. What do you think of it?
That's tough. I will admit, like I haven't done as deep a dive into After Hours since I have this, just because of this podcast format. Like in terms of some of the highs of After Hours, I might prefer those a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Like because it just felt like a bit more energy,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like that's fine. Like I feel like the what he was trying to accomplish with the album was a slightly different, right? And it's just kind of have that more dreamy vibe, which is cool. And I think there's a lot of great songs that capture that vibe ultimately. Um, it's just like when you look back at like these like really memorable albums that you're going to be returning to uh, 10 years down the line, there's a
Mm-hmm.
couple more singles or tracks off of After Hours that might more likely, like well, that was like really fun song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which like to me, it's probably really only going to be like Take My Breath, maybe a few others that might just be like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I still think it's a good album. You enjoyed the album listening to it. It's just not as memorable.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I'm on a similar page there with Kevin on not diving too deep into After Hours, but listening to a lot of the discography, I felt like I was saving like a good amount of songs from After Hours. Like immediately, I saved like 4 songs, and then like 2 of them were from After Hours. I was like, damn, okay. But yeah, it's definitely a different vibe. Like Kevin's saying, it's got that dreamier vibe, and I like that dreaminess, but it's definitely less sticking out, similar to what Kevin said, where it's like there's a lot more like single songs from After Hours that I can pull as opposed to from Dawn FM. There's again the few 2, 3, 4 songs that are like, yeah, I love these songs, I'm gonna save them. But I think they work better in the realm of the album. I think the songs are a lot better in the album looking at it as a whole, as opposed to just being like, oh, let me chuck on my weekend playlist and like, you'll listen to some weekend, right? Like you might again have those few songs from Dawn, but I felt like a lot of them belong in the album on like a full listen through kind of aspect where they kind of have that like similar vibe and they all flow in the same kind of way. Um but definitely, yeah, it's again, I like dancey stuff. I like that like upbeat stuff, and After Hours had a lot of that, and it was just like nice to go. Um, but with Dawn, I felt it was a much more relaxed vibe, similar to what Kevin was saying. Um, but yeah, there's not too many that are like crazy great that are like, oh my god, again, Take My Breath, and I love Out of Time, and even Less Than Zero is really good too. Best Friends as well. But besides that, everything else kind of just like, yeah, it's good and it's cool and it fits the vibe real nice, but it's not like jumping out at me being like, you know,
that's the thing, right? Like just to hop off of that, like I feel like there's a lot of songs that could capture a vibe, and you could throw those like select songs onto a certain playlist,
mhm,
but you wouldn't actually like seek out this
mm,
record as a whole specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's tough. It's really tough to really make a summary of it because you enjoyed the album, but it's just like it's a different. Um, it's trying to capture something different than what most albums are trying to capture, particularly in like the popular music, right?
mhm,
So it's
100%.
it's a difficult one to really wrangle an overall opinion on for
For
sure.
sure.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
see it. And I kind of already touched on this in the intro, saying that After Hours definitely had higher highs, but also
Mm,
very low lows, and Dawn was more consistent but safe, And yeah,
mm,
similar to what you were saying, Seb. There's more songs that popped in After Hours I'd pick up
mm,
than Dawn. Like Alone Again was one of my most listened to when After Hours came out. I thought that was an excellent song. So going in from there, where would you rank this in the discography? From what you're familiar with, at least.
sorry, me? Well, you cut out a bit. What was that?
Anyone, yeah. So whatever you're familiar with,
What, what
like in
would
the
you like to
albums,
see?
where would you put that? Where would you place it? And we
Oh,
can,
where would you place it?
yeah, compared to the other albums. I guess
So
we can get into scores as well because we haven't done that yet.
yeah. So definitely I'm a big fan of Dawn FM as a whole.
Mhm.
But there's definitely songs like going into a lot of the discography. I haven't had a full listen through on any of his other albums, and I'm sure some of them I might be like, "Oh my god, that's way better than Don FM." But song-wise, again, just like you're saying, it's safe, it's nice, it's good. There's nothing horrible about it. but it's nothing like, to bring the cows home. It's nothing like redonkulously like up there, like, oh, top 3 albums and stuff. Granted, again, I haven't dug into a lot of his other stuff, and based on my personal opinion, I might like Don FM more than, Behind the Madness or whatever, right? Um, but I definitely wouldn't say it's top 3. It's
Mhm.
it's good, but it's I feel like The Weeknd has a lot better things he can do, right? And like a lot higher highs that he can reach, and like things he can achieve with his voice alone, let alone his whole production team and whatever. So I
Final
wouldn't put it
score.
that high, but just to give my ranking on the album, I think I'd have to give it like a 7.5. Like it's
Mhm.
it's it's pretty good. I'm like feathering on the 8, honestly. I really enjoyed it. Again, I like the whole essence it captures. I like the concept of it. I think the songs are all really fun. Again, even choosing a worst song, I was like, yeah, definitely Don't Break My Heart, but looking back at it, I was like, damn, this song's kind of nice though. Like it's interesting, and I like what he does, and I like a lot of the vocal changes from like that high straight into the low, or like a lot of the lyrics too. Like, I know you were saying the Weeknd's not like crazy lyrical, but like, it's still nice to see what he's trying to convey in each song, right? Like with the lyrics he has chosen, right? And so like I really enjoyed the album. I thought it was a really good album. But again, I wouldn't save the whole album. I wouldn't be like, yo, check out this whole album, unless it's someone who's like really into music and really like into like conceptual albums in that sense, being like, yo, like if you like that stuff, bro, Don FM's perfect. Like it's really good, like the way it goes and the way all the songs flow nicely. Again, there's the odd one out here and there that you're kind of like, oh, that's not that good, but what are you gonna do? You can't have a all 5-star album start to finish, unfortunately, no matter who you be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Kevin.
definitely I'd put it up there, Kev. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the album. He succeeded capturing the vibe he was going for. Ultimately, though, definitely doesn't rank too high on his overall album lists. I think if like from what I've heard of some of the best Weekend stuff,
Hmm.
I think he's at his best when he can really when he's talking or singing, talking. I hate to make this comparison because I feel like it's kind of funny this injustice, but I feel like you know how in Trapped in the Closet, how R. Kelly's like doing that singing, talking, but he's telling a story. I
Yeah.
think Abel does that magnificently in
Lovely.
Trilogy. Like you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
He
It's a
right
great comparison.
I agree. He's got that nice
little,
voice for it.
just little moments of that. I feel like I wrote it down in the second verse in How Do I Make You Love Me, where there's
Mhm.
like a little tease or something like that, where he's just like I don't know, he's just like he's singing, talking to the audience, um, which is I think that's when he's really at his best, when he can really because you can add a lot more nuance than just like those like clear, catchy pop verses and all that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you didn't really see that for the most part on this album, and that's fine in terms of just you know the album's still enjoyable,
Mhm.
but without certain ambitions of trying to really communicate better is through methods like that. I can't put him too high in his overall album list.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's been tough. I've been struggling to kind of come up with a solid score because I went as high as like a 7.8. Um, but it's weird. Like it's almost in my conversation with you guys, my opinion has kind of shifted a little bit, just
Mhm.
because I think I realized that there's aspects of After Hours I certainly like better,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think I put it. You know what? I think a 7.3 is a
Mhm.
solid number. It's fine. Nothing wrong with the album. Enjoyable. But if you want to have be left, with that MJ status, with that, look
Mhm.
at it, dropping all these albums that are going to be looked at from generations in the future.
Mhm.
I don't think an album like this is ultimately going to do that, with
Mhm.
the exception to like Take Your Breath or
Yeah.
maybe
a few songs.
like
The
a few songs,
standouts.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the vibe I've kind of been left with.
Mm,
Mhm.
sure. Mhm.
Yeah, definitely agree with a lot that's being said. I think comparing it to the rest of his, discography, based on personal preference, it'd be very, very
Mhm.
low on the list. I
Mm.
won't lie.
Mhm.
But again, that's based on personal preference because and we, I've reiterated this. The sound I want from him is different, right? What I look towards, what I, when I'm in a certain mood, and I need some trilogy, right? I need some
Mm.
Kissland. I
Mhm.
need those hard hitting beats with like somber vocals in the background. That's what really gets me. But obviously, looking at it, it's still a great project. Artistically speaking, he really achieved something and is keeping that synth 80s like R&B mixed with rock disco
Mhm.
music going. He's all over the place, but he's still concise enough where you could tell, you hear any single song, you could tell which album that belongs to, right? And with the
Yeah.
exception of Best Friends, that didn't belong there. But
Great song.
it is still a great album despite those things, and there is some odd decisions like with the features there that could have been, I think, handled better. But
Mhm.
yeah, my final score is a 7. That's what I placed it at. It's a good album.
Mm.
It's not great. It doesn't do anything fantastic. Again, very safe.
Mhm.
But it's still, despite that, a good album that I'll go back to it, see which songs will stick with me. But going on from there, he announced that this is part of a trilogy,
Oh,
where
damn.
After Hours was the first song, Dawn FM the middle
Mhm.
song, and he does tease it there in the end of the album where the radio station says, "Here's another hour of uninterrupted music." And
Mm.
that talks about Afterlife, the trilogy being Afterlife
Oh
being
yeah, 'cause he's
the
talking
third
about
album.
Afterlife coming.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
what do you guys want from that? What do you like? Are you excited? What are you
Mhm.
looking forward to the final of the trilogy?
Sure. I'll just hop on that quick, just because I do like these '80s synths and dance music in the '80s. I would love to have some more of that energy. I think this is a cool project, but
Mhm.
I'd like to see a shift in that. I think with someone who he's worked with in the past, let me just get his name because it's German. Gesselful, Ges Gesaffelstein.
Yeah,
I
I know what you're
really
talking
like
about.
him. He's a great, like,
Mhm.
popular techno and electronic artist, and I feel like he'd do really well working with him again on a project like this. Because he brings some really creative electronic music, so I would love to see him as a feature. I think, like, reflecting on the features of this project, I mean, at least I mean, there was two, but
Yeah.
the Lil Wayne one could be better. I'm curious. I don't know. I feel like they weren't crazy features.
Mhm.
Like, Tyler did a good job, but I would have liked to see someone different.
Mhm.
I don't know, just like someone who normally wouldn't, like, I don't know. I just feel like the Weeknd's known for like bringing
Mhm.
these other artists,
Yeah.
especially electronic artists. That's kind of what I want to bring up. Like, I pointed out
Yeah. Yeah.
Geffelstein, but like someone who's not necessarily just based in the hip hop and R&B
Mhm.
world, because you can create something really cool with that, right?
Sure.
Um, so that's because it is a risk, but like I'm really curious to hear something like that. It's like, oh, this
Mm.
is something new, right? It's something
Mm.
experimenting. So it usually means that there's something different about it and some risk taking. So that's what I like to see as far as features go. But yeah, I definitely would like to see more dancey slash dark, because I think ultimately the '80s synths do really well at that, like, dark ambiance, hard hitting. You love like the Stranger Things intro. It has that
Mm.
very eerie.
Mhm.
It accomplishes that vibe well, and I
Yeah,
think you can
sure.
kind of take some of the best of Abel's past work and still fit it within this without it. It might be difficult to really accomplish because he is now like this pop star. He's
Mm.
appeal to the general audience, so maybe it is asking too much to kind of bring back some of his old style and kind of really probably bring it into this instrumentation that he's brought through now in this new trilogy. But
Mm.
yeah, we'll see what he does with it.
Mhm. Yeah, honestly, I wanted to touch upon just what you were saying there about like having features that aren't just in the R&B hip
Mhm.
hop like kind of realm. Because yeah, honestly, like don't get me wrong, the production is great,
Yeah.
But man, some of these songs would have just excelled, and even some of the lower songs would have been better if he had someone who kind of worked in like 80s synth music and like had them come in even for a song or two, just kind of capture the vibe more. Because yeah, Lil Wayne didn't fit. I'm sorry. I enjoyed
No,
Tyler's
not at all.
part. It was nice. I like the essence he brought, but even then, it was just kind of like I don't know. It just didn't fit that 80s synth like vibe, which I was really getting from the album. This like radio station. I mean,
Mhm.
the best feature on the album is Jim Carrey, hands down. He captured the essence of the album, bro, and like that was one of my favorite things. I love. I wish he was kind of like in a bit more just to get more of that radio vibe. Like he was in it nicely. I felt like he was in. I didn't want him too much like after every song, but like that little chunk after Out of Time where he just like says a few words and stuff, and then he goes into that like now here's another hour of like music and stuff or whatever. Like that, like it just pulls me back into it, right? Where it's like I'm not just listening to music song after song. I'm listening to like something, right? There's something more here, right? But yeah, having those kinds of features and stuff would have definitely helped. And of course, I feel like it's tougher, and half the time it's like I go ask some people, "Hey, you guys know who The Weeknd is?" Like, yeah. It's like, "Hey, do you know this '80s synth music creator?" And they're like, "Who? What's '80s synth?" And it's like, "Do you mean The Weeknd?" Yeah,
If I could just quickly touch on just your
yeah, for
point
sure.
of all that, it just because one of obviously you guys know Daft Punk, and
Who's
the
that?
Weeknd's collaborated with him, of course,
Yeah.
and it just brought to me. There's one song off of the last record by Daft Punk called
Mm.
Giorgio Molinar. Anyways, it's basically this whole
Yeah, yeah,
opus
yeah.
dedicated to one of like the pioneers of
Mm.
the synth disco music, and it's such a sick song. And they use him like his commentary, basically just like describing his life and how he got into music and how he kind of decided to get into what he ultimately really pioneered because he wanted to create the music of the future, right?
Mhm.
Um, but that's really cool and how they integrated him with the music. I guess my main question through all this is just like you mentioned, you would like to see some features kind of within that realm or something outside of R&B and hip hop. Is there any particular artists that immediately come to mind for you?
So not specifically. Again, it was just jumping on more like what you were saying in that sense, like you wanted to see
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. I'm not. I don't know if I'd want to see that for future pieces unless they're conceptual like this one. This one really had like a vibe, it had an essence, and so it's like I would like to see people in that realm of music just to capture it better and like solidify. Not saying that the album lacked that at all. Like it brought me in nicely with the radio station, with the infomercial
Mhm.
thing or whatever, right? I don't know why I keep saying infomercial. um, but like that kind of vibe. So it was like I was really in the world, but like it's true where it's like I felt like yeah, the features weren't as you know like didn't fit well, right? As to Afterlife or whatever the third one. Um, I think I like the direction he's going. I'd like to see if it is, this trilogy. I'd like to see how it not only connects but also kind of like tops and concludes the trilogy, right? I want to see it be in the same realm but be different, right? I want to see it have something that kind of makes it its own album, not just part of the three. Like still having that vibe and it still have that, but kind of like I'm really curious what's gonna happen. I'd almost like if he even pulls like a full 180 and like does zero like synth stuff or like maybe a song or two kind of thing. I'd be really interested in that because it seems like it's like leading up into this like because the way I took Don FM was like again pre-death like right before you die. A lot of the songs to me seemed like it was like oh like some questions and like some things and talking about regrets or talking about past relationships or past like situations where it's like kind of like reminiscing or like reflecting on these things before you die and again ties in with like the Phantom Regret by Jim at the end like it's kind of like oh yeah it's this like looking back at what you've done or looking forward or looking like what are you looking for and like the only way to see heaven is to be heaven and that kind of concept. And so that even though that line alone like brings me into like, what will afterlife be based on? Is that going to be
Mhm.
like, if this synth is like this pre-death kind of vibe and it fits it real nice, like what's he gonna go into? Like I'm thinking like, church gospel choir ass, like something like, like Donda 2 or something.
I
But
don't
yeah,
think it'll be too much of
I don't
a
think so
step away
either.
from what Dawn or After Hours were,
For
specifically
sure.
because it is a trilogy. I
Mhm.
think he will evolve the music as he always does per
Mhm.
album, which I always appreciated from The Weeknd. Like he doesn't
Sure.
really stick to a sound; he will evolve.
Mhm.
I think we'll hear more like "Take My Breath" type of music in
Mm,
Afterlife, just based on what the theme of,
for
well,
sure.
what you assume the theme is, right? And looking at
Mm,
like more dreamy synths and more drawn out kind of
mm.
songs, which I'm excited for. I'm excited
Yeah.
what he can do with that. Yeah, I definitely think it'll still stick to the same overall theme that like Dawn and After Hours have been synthetically, how they've been sounding and such.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's some good
Good.
shit.
Great.
Yeah.
Definitely good album. Definitely.
You wanna yeah, it's a great album and I'm excited
Any
to,
final thoughts? Yeah.
continue to explore it.
Final
But
thoughts. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I just yeah, like looking back at some of the songs you guys were mentioning you didn't like that much. I'm like, yeah, I could see that. Like it's funny because like you mentioned those things and then like it kind of brought me back to thinking at the first time I heard the album where it's like, yeah, you're right. Like I did expect it and I felt like listening it to more, I kind of just was like, oh, it's okay that he didn't do that. But it's not okay, Like I want to be critical of this. Like I want him to, can't make full bangers, but he could, put that effort, right? Like, burst past that like conformity of just having to make like a nice poppy song that's like easy to listen to, right? I want to hear some interesting stuff, right? And so, yeah, yeah, but it's definitely nice, awesome album. Like I really enjoyed it, like listening through it and stuff. Again, the concept and the vibe was great, and all the synth stuff was awesome too. Yeah.
Yeah, just a few final thoughts. Still really enjoyed the album, but I think I've really come to realize that the peaks have got me wanting more.
mhm.
Like yeah, I keep coming back to Take My Breath Away, and I literally have like a jot note here
Mhm.
in like two asterisks. I saw the fire in your eyes, just want to dance. Just because like that moment, it just like it really, I guess I don't know, it just got me like really feeling it, and
Mhm.
I just didn't really have that experience really on any other track to that
Mhm.
degree. There's
Mhm.
still a lot of great moments, a lot of great tracks,
Mhm.
but for what I want, and I realized that like what he can do in terms of like 80s dance music
Yeah.
could be a lot stronger. I think, yeah.
Mhm.
After Hours had a bit more of that, I will say.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm curious. Like you hear things that you might try to do a bit more of that in the next album. I hope that's true.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see what he'll do with the finale of this trilogy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ultimately, when if you look back at the trilogy of a whole as a whole, this album might fit in well as like a kind of nice
Yep.
flavor change, right? Like you can't just have bangers all the time as much as we love. I feel
Mhm.
like this could create some nice nuance as an overall arcing trilogy. So
Sure.
I'm excited to see where
Mhm.
it'll go, and then I can really have it. I feel like I might be able to come back and change my opinion once I
Mhm.
hear the final
Mhm.
album of this.
Yeah. And just to interject real quick, yeah, I just want to also say like, yeah, I now like thinking of it too. I'm like, I feel like yeah, like Don FM won't be like second best out of the trilogy, I don't think. But I'm curious to see how Afterlife comes out because I feel like Dawn FM's that precursor, so it's like almost the build up to Afterlife. So I am very curious to see where that takes it and
Is
stuff.
Afterlife like the confirmed title of his next album?
No, we're just speculating.
Not 100%
I mean that.
confirmed. It is
But
confirmed to be a trilogy. He
the
did
Yeah,
trilogy,
confirm
yeah,
that.
it
I mean that name would fit.
is.
Very
With
much
After
so, and
Hours and
it's
Afterlife.
repeated
Yeah.
throughout the album multiple times as
Yes,
well. So
he says
it's
it also in like the commercial, right? It's like
yeah,
Afterlife, like the new like critics say
yeah,
this and that, right? But I think he might be calling the full trilogy Afterlife, maybe, right?
it's possible
That's
as
true.
well. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Hero, last
Yeah,
thoughts.
I think yeah. Just reiterate a lot of things that you guys were saying. It's a good album without a doubt. No one can take that away. Again, the production is something special. throughout the whole album. The production is just fantastic. The transitions are amazing. I definitely recommend listening to this from top to bottom just to experience those transitions. But it has leaving me wanting more. So a lot of it is like there could have been more excitement. You know, the album just felt so safe. Where After Hours there was a bit more experimentation, and I that's what I want the most for Afterlife or whatever the next album will be called. Is just experiment a bit more. You know, like get out of the comfort zone. Try to get that weird sound, and I think one reason that Alone Again was such a standout for me for After Hours is because he experimented. He mixed that 80s synth, but with like very classical R&B and beat switches and heavy vocals. And that's one thing I always will love about The Weeknd is his vocals. And I always emphasize this, that just use your best instrument, which is your voice, right? Just use that a bit more, right? Like that's what I want to hear the most out of The Weeknd is using those vocals. Really let himself experience in the song. That's why Take My Breath is so special, because he allows himself to have almost 6 minutes of just experimenting with his voice, right? Letting that thing go. And that's why that song is so special. So a lot more of that, I think, would really make that last album something amazing. So I'm excited for sure. I think, honestly, I don't think we'd have to wait too long for that next album. I think he wants to tour with like the trilogy, I'm assuming. So I wouldn't be surprised if we waited maybe max a year, like, you know, just over a year before we heard the sequel to that.
Nice.
But yeah, so thanks for tuning the Jungle Beats. We just hit a bit over an hour. Man, time flew. Yeah, we're excited to do some more album reviews, hopefully, as well other stuff in the podcast. Yeah, Seb, you want to close us off?
Life and stuff. Yeah, just close off. I just want to quickly mention, because you were saying his voice, and I'm like, yeah, honestly, I felt like there was a lot of like not covers, like the filters and stuff over his voice, and like different things he did with it in this album. But definitely like hearing back to a lot of his discography, like the tracks that really stick out are the ones where you just hear his raw voice like coming through, and that felt like on Take My Breath, besides, you know, obviously like the hook or whatever. But like on some of the tracks here, I felt like it maybe 1 or 2 tracks, like it really, like I heard his voice, but besides that it was all filtered. And I don't mind it sounds good or whatever, but I want that raw like Weekend vibe, because it's true, it's like his instrument, right? It's like I want to hear it. I want to listen to like the wavering in your voice, even if it's not like perfectly auto-tuned out. Like I want to hear where you're going or where you're feeling, right? Like every little bit of that, right? And it's just like it's an experience that I feel like The Weeknd really provides with his voice that no other artist does.
Yeah,
I disagree, but that's okay.
Fair enough. Wow.
the following podcast. We're far too far in now.
No. Ultimately, like I agree and disagree. It's more of that, like, I think it all depends on how they use filters, really, right?
Yep.
Sure. Oh, 100%. Oh, don't get me wrong. I love the filters in this thing. Like some of the things, like the way his voice is filtered, it's like, yeah, it fits nice and it fits the whole song as a whole.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see The Weeknd put a lot more.
Yeah, like I totally agree. There's so many great moments in his discography where it's just like him singing and he kills it. I think we all agree on that, right? So, yeah,
for sure. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys.
great discussion.
We've been the Monkaroos. Hope you enjoyed the album review of Dawn FM by The Weeknd. Yeah, we'll definitely tune in. I'm sure we'll make like a smaller podcast based on the single and when it comes out for Afterlife, quote unquote, and you know, our speculations and whatnot, and then we'll definitely do an album review on that, and possibly After Hours, now that we're talking about it so much and the whole trilogy's coming together. So yeah, hope everyone enjoyed, and I've been MC Sebsy, Kevin, and Googs. We've been the Monkaroos. Hope you enjoyed Jungle Beats. Tune in for next time. Follow us all. You can find me at MCSebsy7 on Twitch. Kevin?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitch at Penderblast11.
You can find me at Googs9 on most platforms like Twitch or YouTube. Yeah, first video up, so you know this is definitely still a work in progress, so let us know any recommendations you might have. Yeah, and stick around.
Like, subscribe, and do all those good things. Apparently hitting that bell notifies you as well, so don't dwell. Alrighty, take it easy.